first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this distinguished round of speakers today. Very inspiring. Had the chance to be here with you in the morning a little bit and also in the afternoon. I guess you have really managed to bring together a quite impressive group of people, and I feel myself inspired at the end of this day. And now I have the task to keep you all a little bit more inspired for the next, whatever, 30, 40 minutes before we continue then with the more like weekend planning. So thank you very much for this. It's an honor for us to be here. And I would also like to thank you for the initiative to bring up this very important topic. We have heard it from several speakers today. Sustainability, sustainable development is actually our future. And if we don't go down this road of sustainability and of sustainable development, we will probably not have a future. And I mean, in countries like the US or Germany, European Union, Canada, where we have currently pretty nice livelihoods that may not be so visible, but especially in countries which need to catch up. And well, Ukraine is definitely one of those which need to transform. There's maybe even more urgent need to take up that concept, because only there is the future. And on the other side, especially also in societies and economies like Ukraine's, there are a lot of chances in this, because there is anyway the need to transform. We in Germany, we are currently a little bit in this, how to say that, well, a lot of resistance against changes also in terms of green economy, in terms of, even though Germany is supposed to be one of the countries which has a very strong green energy sector. Yes, it is, but still there is a lot of resistance. Why? Because the people have a pretty nice life. Why change it? Why risk that anything is being changed? And in this respect, Ukraine maybe even has an advantage regarding other countries like Germany or the US. Mr. Sachs has mentioned it 1 hour ago. This resistance that you had in the US over the last 4 years, of course, was a very strong one. So I would like to jump into my presentation. I've called it Technical Assistance for Sustainable Economic Development and Perspectives from Ukraine, because this is what I'm actually responsible for. I'm responsible for everything that GIZ does in Ukraine in terms of economic development. But I will not go so much into what we do, but more how we do it. So content of my little presentation before we then go to discussions is who we are, who is GIZ. I don't know if that is known to everyone here in the audience. What are we doing in Ukraine, of course? Which approaches and principles do we apply in this respect to achieve sustainable economic development? And what can we learn from our experience? But here we already lead over, I guess, into the discussion. So, wondering why now this, here we are. So who is GIZ? We are a service provider in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development and international education work. We are a German government-owned company. Obviously, the loading does take a little longer. Sorry for the technical glitch. Now here. We support the German government in achieving its objectives in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development, because actually the German government is our only owner and shareholder. We promote international education work and human capacity development. As a German public benefit enterprise, we uphold German and European values. That's also something we are not. We are sometimes also the independent broker, but we have a clear orientation in terms of values behind us. And we are a company under private law, and that makes us in this development community maybe a little bit special. We have a taxable business area, which is called GIZ International Services, which is working like a normal consulting company. alongside our public benefit business area, which is actually the bunch of what we do, and especially in Ukraine, the public benefit area is for sure the biggest one. A little bit of business statistics about GIZ. We are, in the meanwhile, roughly 22,000 people worldwide. We have a turnover of 3.1 billion euros per year. We are working in more than 120 countries worldwide. So we are a global company in that respect. I'm not going through all of this, all of these bullets here at the moment. Our vision, and this is important because that is what's driving us, is to create a future worth living around the world. This is what GIZ is striving for. This is what our company values are directed at. We want to improve livelihoods of people around the world in various areas. And sustainability is the heart of our actions because this actually is what our future is. So social responsibility is part of all of our projects. Ecological balance is what we need to achieve through all of our projects, and we run those projects in various fields. Economic capability, of course, also because I mentioned it before. Of course, you need a certain level of economic capacity also in order to live, make ends meet. We do this because we aim to achieve lasting results, and only when we reflect those three areas of sustainability, which have been mentioned a few times before today, only then we can really achieve lasting results and not just, well, little straw fires, I would like to say. GIZ in Ukraine, little motto that we gave us Together for Europe, because Ukraine is in Europe and Ukraine is aiming at getting nearer to the European Union. The association agreement, a big political background, of course, but also a lot of our donors drive. So this is why we have also taken this up for us. We are working in Ukraine since 1993. We have currently 31 ongoing projects, but actually I didn't want to talk about all of those individual projects. And it's also always a matter how we separate them and how we group them together. What is important is that Ukraine is one of the 5 biggest portfolios of GIZ worldwide. So the bigger ones are Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, I think, but Ukraine is really in the center of our attention and of the attention of our commissioning parties, especially also, of course, the government of Germany, but also the European Union. And that we have such a big portfolio in Ukraine is a clear indication for that. And I have to say that that hasn't been the case 8 years ago. 8 years ago, our portfolio in Ukraine was a rather small one. Due to everything that happened in and after 2014, of course, Ukraine has become very important on the political landscape, and also the support for Ukraine has accelerated a lot. Our country office is based in Kiev, but we are, we'll come back to this, we are active all over Ukraine, and our country office in Kiev is also responsible for Belarus, where we only have very small action. A little bit about what we do in Ukraine. As I just said, we work in all 24 regions of Ukraine. The number of projects I have mentioned, we have 400 people in the meanwhile in Ukraine. Most of them Ukrainian, around 50 seconded people like myself. Don't go through all of these bullets. Business volume in 2020 was 57 million euros. So that's the amount of money that we turned over in Ukraine last year. Around 17 million of this coming from the European Union and from the Swiss government, and the bunch 35 million coming from the German government. So the areas that we work in, sustainable economic development, I have mentioned it, that's what I'm also responsible for. Energy efficiency and climate, good governance, and security, reconstruction, and peace, and especially in Eastern Ukraine. So this is nothing that GIZ has invented, I have to say, because what we do is very much defined by the people who give us commissions, usually the German government or the European Union. But you see that when you see those, well, 3 focus areas of our intervention, it already fits into the sustainability agenda, because it addresses exactly the 3 dimensions of sustainability that have been discussed so often today. We work all over Ukraine. I've mentioned this. I will not go into the details. Unfortunately, even though I'm in Ukraine for more than 4 years, I've never been personally to Ivano-Frankivsk. So I'm very happy to have the chance today, at least, to be virtually with you. And I very much hope that maybe later this year we will be a little bit more free and also be able to see that. We have just recently, from one of the projects that I'm responsible for, also initiated activities in Ivano-Frankivsk, a concept that we call COVID-19 business clinic for small and medium-sized enterprises to overcome the negative effects of the pandemic. But we will come maybe back to this a little later. Sustainable economic development in Ukraine, the context, Ukraine, and it's always something that is unbelievable for me, knowing now this country for a while, has the lowest GDP per capita. There is an L too much per capita in Europe, and in a country like Ukraine with such big potential, Mr. Sachs has also mentioned it, with a very well-educated population. This is more or less not understandable. So there must be something. Then, of course, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which has brought the Ukrainian economy and all the economies in the world further into turmoil. But we also have, well, contexts that are positive. We have the association agreement with the European Union and the free trade area, which is defined within it. We have a lack of qualified labor, even though we have a well-educated population. We have a lack of qualified labor in a lot of fields. And what we also do have is we have a lot of vulnerable groups, internally displaced persons who need maybe a special support. I don't want to go into all those points, but just to give you a little overview on what we do in economic development before we come to how we do it. We address the topic of economic development, and when we talk about economic development, we talk in the end about what the people have in their pockets to make their lives. And we address it from the demand side and from the supply side. When we talk about the supply side, we have a very strong focus on vocational integration and training. So not academic training as you are providing as a university, but vocational integration and training, skilled labor. So this is one of the key fields, which at this moment where we have a huge reform going on in Ukraine, and we are supporting that with a very strong focus. The second area, when we more talk about the demand side of labor, is trade promotion, is supporting small and medium-sized enterprises as 2 big topics, making Ukraine's, and all of this combined, making Ukraine's economy more competitive on the way to, to be able to use the advantages of the association agreement that you have with the European Union. Because when you're opening markets, when you're integrating markets, and this is one of the key things behind the association agreement, you need to be competitive. If not, you lose. And in this respect, this is very important. And we try to do it from both sides when we look at the labor market, the demand side, getting small and medium-sized enterprises more competitive internally, and then also on the supply side of labor, training people, getting people into modern jobs. This is also something when we look about future orientation. We have outdated curricula in these ways. We need to update it, and we're in new professions outside. When we talk about construction businesses, everything that has to do with energy efficiency also in construction, these are future fields where people need new training, lifelong learning, but also updated curricula in order to be able to work in these, I wouldn't say new areas, but with the updated kind of technology that's going on here in the world. I will jump to the next slide, also not to talk too long. How do we do this? Which approaches do we take to make projects sustainable? And actually, what do we do to achieve the goal of sustainable economic development even more? And we have a few principles that we follow in all of our projects, no matter if it's on vocational education and training, whether it's on SME promotion, whether it's regional development, whether it's local economic development, whether it's startup promotion. First of all, we do tailor-made approaches for each context and content. And that's why an analysis beforehand is very important. We use multi-level approaches, intervening on several levels of intervention. I'll come back to this on the next slide. We have a very strong focus on multi-stakeholder approaches, has been also mentioned today various times. We have a multi-dimension approach also when we talk about capacity development. I will also come back to this later. And we have now for roughly 10 years our own management approach in order to achieve sustainable development, which we internally call capacity works. I will also give you a very small introduction into this in the further presentation. Multi-level approach, it sounds very easy, maybe it is, and logical, but I think it is really a matter of one of the key success factors that we have. When we plan projects, we usually look at those three levels: the macro level, where we talk about policies, where we talk about framework conditions; the meso level, where we talk about multipliers, when we talk about economic development, for example, business associations, and well, regional ecosystems. And when we talk about the micro level, that's the target groups. It's small and medium-sized enterprises, and the employees of small and medium-sized enterprises especially. And to make when we plan a project, we always look at these three levels, and we look what do we need to do on those three levels to be successful. In the individual tailored approach, there may be projects which have a very strong focus on the macro level, but they never forget the micro level. It may be that we have sometimes in other projects have a very strong focus on the micro level, but we don't forget the macro level and the meso level in between in any way now. So this is one of the key approaches that we actually always think through when we plan a project in order to make it sustainable. The second big multi-approach is the multi-stakeholder approach, and it has been discussed today. We need to integrate several stakeholders in order to make projects sustainable, and we need to take them with us if we want to do change and if we want to reform, make change happen. And this is we won't achieve this if we don't take all of those three sectors of society with us. The private sector, in a little bit like self-evident when you talk about economic development, but in other countries maybe not. I mean, where we have very strong state economies, and to be honest, also in Ukraine, you still have a lot of state-owned economy. The public sector, of course, because they are the policymakers, you can never forget them, but also the civil society, you need to take them with you. And I would like to give you just one example over the last years from macro level intervention. We were given very strong support to the elaboration of a national export strategy of Ukraine. And the key feature was to take these three sectors of people with you. We had multiple rounds of consultations. That was before the pandemic. We could meet in person. We had more than 1,400 people gathering on several occasions from these sectors. And in the end, we had very nice, from my perspective, very nice strategies. We have to say that only this approach made this successful. Why? We also know the political landscape. That was before the political landscape. Then came COVID. And I have to say that some of the strategies are even not yet approved by the Ukrainian government and officially being implemented. But unofficially, lots of things that are within those strategies is already being implemented by other stakeholders from the private sector and from civil society, because they were participating in developing it. And these were the measures that they actually said, we have to do it. That is important for us. So they did it, whether there is a government decision on it or not. So this is for a little small example on how projects can be planned so to be successful. We have the multi-dimensional approach in capacity development, and that's, I think, something that is very important. When we talk about capacity development, it's not only about the human resources development of individual human resources. Of course, training of an individual is always part of our project concepts, because if you don't train people, they will not do things differently or better, or be able to change their so you always need it, but you should not forget the organizational dimension of it. So we have the human resources dimension of capacity development. We have the organizational dimension of capacity development, and we should not forget how often do people change their job. So we train people, then they leave. So we need to train the next person who is doing that job. And through organizational development, you can work on sustainability here. We need to work on network and cooperation systems, because that's how things work together and how synergies are being used. And in the end, we must, of course, always have in mind the overall system development. To give you one example, again, from sustainable economic development interventions, if we, for example, have a cluster approach that we support, let's say, I don't know, cluster from the fashion industry in some Ukrainian oblast, then usually we have, when we talk about cluster, this is a network and cooperation system in itself. But we may not forget that there is a system surrounding this. So those two dimensions are automatically, when we go into such an approach, covered. But then we will train people, of course, to work together in such a cluster, to manage such a cluster. But we will also look at an organizational development so that we have structures who can bring this this cluster approach for economic development further, and who can then, in the good case or best case scenario, after a while take over the thing completely by themselves, so that they don't need further support. So these are the 4 dimensions of capacity development that we need, and this all is somehow embedded in our general management approach, which is called Capacity Works, and which gives us the wide context for project management, but which is really also helpful in the small things that you do every day. And this is not rocket science. This is nothing, if you want, this is really nothing new. A lot of things that are in there have been done before. Sometimes when I saw it for the first time, I thought, well, I know this, I know that approach, I know this approach. But it brings it together in a very logical way. And the idea is that if you want to achieve sustainable development, you need to look at 5 success factors. And they give you a little, for me, this is like a compass that I go through whenever I plan something, or whenever I review something, or whenever I take a decision. First of all, you need to think about your strategy. What's your objective? Where do you want to go? And where are you now? And how do you get there? And only by having a good strategy, you will be able to get there. So strategy as the first success factor that you need. The second one, and it's also logical in everything that you have heard from today, is cooperation. You need to know who are your stakeholders. Whom do you need to take with you? Who are the key decision makers that you have to also convince when you implement reform or change projects. So cooperation, who is there, who is relevant, this is a key factor of success that you need to know and that you need to think about. The third one, steering, who is actually taking the decisions when you talk about change, or when you talk about, well, your maybe the that you just do today, organizing this conference, who is taking the decision. And so you need a relevant steering structure, also covering the stakeholders, and of course adjusted to your strategy. So these are, let's say, the 3 things that we very often think before we start implementation. But not only, this is something, as I said, I very often, just in my everyday business, I think, okay, where do I actually want to go? What's my strategy? Who do I need on board? Whom do I need to call? Who do I need to invite to a meeting? How do we take these decisions? And then the two other factors, processes. While you implement, you always need to monitor where are you, what are the important key processes that you have, where are support processes that you need. So while implementing, this is the key success factor. And then in the end, you need to learn and you need to innovate, because this is also a key feature, if I would like to say, of our projects, but most probably of all projects. You can have planned a perfect project, and while you're implementing, you will need to already change it. So to learn and to innovate while implementing, and of course also after implementing, this is a key success factor in order to achieve sustainable development. That's how we work. That's how we manage. And we've learned a lot of this. I guess we have been very successful in Ukraine over the last years. And I think that I'm confident enough to say that our services are thought after, that we are offering obviously a good product here. But we also see that there are certain, besides those things that I've mentioned, that we still need to also learn some things. And one of the points that also were very teaching for me over the last 4.5 years that I'm now in Ukraine is things also need time, and you can't force them. And especially when I arrived in 2016, it was still very much of this post-Maidan drive, where you see, okay, things need to change and they need to change now. But some things also need time. And this is, I guess, something that you need to learn, that usually you will not be able to achieve what you defined in your strategy within a few months, but it might take you more time. It might take you more than 3 years than the normal project cycle. You need to take time, and you shouldn't give up. And this is one thing. And with this, I would like to end my words and go into the discussion with you and learn what your experiences are, and maybe can also provide a few more examples in this. Thank you very much.